Doctors Richard Carrier and Dennis MacDonald. I got a question from Noah Chris again. He says, Tertullian writes in Against Marcion, Book 4, well, but Marcion, finding the epistle of Paul to the Galatians, wherein he rebukes even apostles for not walking uprightly according to the gospel. Some have taken this to mean that Tertullian thought that Marcion had been the one to discover Galatians and put it into circulation, which is entirely possible when considering Marcion's wealth and dedication. Does the original Latin provide any insights into Tertullian's meaning in that passage?
Good question. I doubt it, but let's find out.
Interesting.
I need the context, first of all. What is Tertullian talking about exactly there?
So he says, finding the epistle.
Let me talk about Marcion a little bit while Richard's looking.
Excellent.
Okay.
The question is an excellent one, and Marcion has to be considered one of the great intellectuals of Christian origins, and one who is unfortunately maligned and often unfairly. But I also think his critics are sometimes unfairly criticized and misunderstood. And I've been working on Marcion's gospel and various theories that spin around that, which I think it'd be fascinating to talk about at some point. But the person who asked this question is really quite well informed, and appealing to the Latin text of Tertullian and the Latin remains of Irenaeus is really the right way to go. But I think there are problems in the way that scholars have read those texts in the past. But I don't claim to be an authority on the issue. But I think I am making myself an authority on the Gospel of Marcion. So that's another issue we can talk about. So that's not directly related to the question that the person asked, but Marcion, in my view, was one of the most brilliant readers of the New Testament and sensitive readers of the New Testament. And the church would be very much different and in some respects better had it become a Marcionite church rather than an Orthodox church. I know that's radical, but I'd be willing to talk about why that's the case.
Okay, so I've got the context. Now, let's get the Latin.
Let me say more about Marcion's gospel then, perhaps. It is a bona fide discovery, but the question is, what does this discovery mean? And there are three revolving issues that scholars are dealing with. The first is, did Marcion create his euangelion, or did he receive it? And there are arguments to be made on both sides of that question. Another question is, does he preserve the earliest version of the Gospel of Mark in this Marcion Gospel, or is it a later truncation, because it's much shorter? Is it a later truncation of the Gospel of Luke, in both cases, and so that the canonical Gospel is an expansion of the Marcionite Gospel? Some would go so far as to say that the Marcion Gospel replaces Q because it has more primitive wording and sequencing and so on, and doesn't show the embellishment of the synoptics. So anyway, that's where the arguments are. I come down securely on the position that the Marcionite Gospel is important. And whether Marcion himself created it or not, it is congenial to Marcion's theology more than many people think. But it's not the earliest gospel of Luke. It's a truncated and to some extent anti-Jewish gospel of Luke that Marcion found congenial. So there you have it.
So The question is, when in the usual English translations it says Marcion found the gospel, Paul's gospel to the Galatians, at no point in that passage, in that section, does Tertullian suggest that Marcion is the one who introduced Galatians to the community, or that Marcion is citing a fake version of Galatians or anything. Tertullian assumes that the Galatians is an authentic letter with the rest of his argument. So it comes down to what does the Latin actually mean? And the Latin is noctus, which has a fairly broad valence. I'll just read out of the standard Lewis and Short Latin definition is to get, to obtain, to receive, to meet with, to stumble on, to light upon, to find. Various examples given of the usage. I think in context, he doesn't mean that, I don't think he's saying that Marcion found, like discovered the gospel. He stumbles across a verse in the gospel and then makes this argument from it. I think that's what, and I think Tertullian chooses the word noctus to kind of belittle Marcion. It's like this, oh, he just stumbles upon Galatians and finds this verse that says this thing, and well, let me tell you about that. And so Tertullian takes him to task for this. So I don't think that passage can be used as evidence that Tertullian thought even that Marcion is the one who discovered the Epistle to the Galatians.
Where do you stand in terms of, you probably weren't hearing Dennis too much, but where do you stand in terms of the Marcion's gospel being like a truncated version of Luke, kind of an anti-Jewish?
You know, I haven't really formed an opinion on that. I know there's a lot of really interesting scholarship I could dive into on this. Because Marcion is so late, and we don't have his gospel, I haven't found it useful for any of the things that I've been doing to do that. There's lots of other things you could do that's very useful for trying to figure out the answer to that question. So I just haven't gone into it very much. I've gone into it just enough to know that there are no settled answers to that question, and there's not a lot I can do with unsettled answers. So I just haven't deep dived into that to really know, to really have a firm opinion about it.